Good morning. Today we are going to talk about economics of drug prevention. Or wars on drug. From your point of view, do you think should drugs be legalized? Actually, there are two different points of view regarding whether drugs should be legalized or not. By the word drug legalized means that selling of drugs is a legal function. There are a number of people who are against this idea and others who support this idea. In a survey conducted in United States, it was found that around 46% of the population use some illicit drugs during their lifetime. So there are a number of people who support the idea that drugs should be legal, can be sold in the markets just like any other commodity, while others see that this idea is actually this idea has many negative impacts on the economy. So let's start with determining what are, with respect to the people who are anti-drug policy, what are the action taken by the government and directed to which part. First of all, drugs, like any market, has a demand side and supply side. So when we are going to analyze it, we have to analyze the demand side and the supply side of this commodity. So what are the policy actions? To decrease or prevent drugs. With respect to supply side, we would like to decrease supply. So the government is going to number one, make effort to prevent drugs from entering the country. Number two, increase severity of punishment of selling of drugs. Number three, involve the military force. So this is from the supply side. What about the demand side? Number one, increase drug awareness and education programs. Number two, increase increase penalties for using drugs. Number three, prisons drug treatment, just like hospitals, but under the legal force of the law. So these are the actions that can be taken by the government in order to decrease demand and supply of drugs. So what are the negative impacts of drugs in the economy? This is from the idea of, or from the point of view of, the people who are against the legalization. It has a negative impact. Number one, adverse personal health. And of course, this is going to affect the economy, as we said before, that 46 of the population use drugs, which will affect their personal health. So they will affect their productivity and growth rates, increased crime, etc. Number two, increase in drug related social programs. Social problems. If drugs were legalized, if it's legal. Okay. Number three, okay, just 2 points, not three. Okay, this is the point of view for the people who are against. What about the people in favor of the drug legalization? From their point of view, that government efforts in order to prevent or restrict the supply of drugs have largely failed. So, as the government failed to prevent supply, so why not? It's going to be legal. Okay. So, number one, efforts by the government fail. Number two, link between illegal drugs, which means as drugs are illegal, so in order to supply them, there are a number of other organized crimes that can be found in the economy in order to be able to supply and sell drugs. So it is highly related to organized crime. As a result, violent crime will uh, result on tariff war. So there is wars among drug dealers. Number three, if you are low level non-violent drug offenders and you are going to be in prison, so you are going to deal with drug dealers, which will affect your behavior later on. So it has negative impact on any other prisoners for any other reason. Okay. Okay. So number one, efforts by government fail. Number two, link between illegal drugs. Number three is drugs may contribute to corruption. So it will not affect just crimes, but also corruption in order to be able to supply and sell the product. This is from a social point of view. What about from economic point of view? Here we are going to talk about the financial support that can we get from selling drugs. Okay, now drugs is like any commodity that's legal to be sold in the market. So the government can impose taxes on sellers of this product. So tax revenue is going to increase. At the same time, the government, if drugs are illegal, the government is going to spend on prisons, crime prevention. So now we are not going to spend on such items. So that this is an opportunity cost from legalizing selling of drugs. So from one side we are going to raise funds for the government. From the other side we are going to save the funds that was spent on these activities. Okay, what about health consequences? Because drugs are illegal, so the government can't regulate their safety, whether it's pure or mixed drugs. And this, of course, is going to affect the health of drug users and may affect the spread of AIDS worldwide. But if it's legal, so it will be sold in a legal form, so we can make sure whether it is pure or mixed. We can make sure that needles are not going to be shared by people. Okay, so it's going to help from the point of view of health point of view. Okay, so this is going to affect the quality of drugs. Okay, so people who are in favor of this idea analyze their point of view in terms of three different conditions. Number one, with respect to efforts made by the government in order to number one, social part, which is related to the fail of government to prevent selling of drugs. Number two, crimes. Number three, corruption. Okay, and then they talked about the financial part and the opportunity cost of drugs, and they see that legalization of drugs will help to raise funds by the government through imposing taxes on the sellers, and number two, minimize or decrease spending on prisons and crime prevention that can be directed toward education and treatment programs. So funds that has been saved from prisons and crime prevention can be directed toward education and the treatment programs. And number three, they talked about health consequences, and they believe that legalization of drugs will help to increase the quality of the product, which is the drugs, and make sure that it will not affect the health of users negatively. Okay, as we said, drugs, like any product, has a demand side and a supply side. So this can be illustrated graphically using the normal demand and supply curves. So now we are going to determine the impact of the demand side. What's going to happen to the demand side of the product? If drugs are legal. So this is demand and supply. Point of intersection is point of equilibrium. If drugs sorry, are legal, so demand is going to increase. So the demand curve will shift to the right, and there is a new intersection point at a higher quantity and a higher price. Okay, this is the impact of legal selling and buying of drugs in the market. From the demand point of view, the demand curve will shift to the right, and the equilibrium quantity is going to increase from Q star to Q double star, and the equilibrium price is going to increase as well from B star to B double star. What about the supply side? In case of supply side, we have to differentiate between whether the demand is elastic or inelastic demand. This is the case of inelastic demand, and this is elastic demand. As drugs are legal, so supply of the product is going to increase. So supply curve will shift to the right. In both cases, equilibrium quantity is going to increase and the equilibrium price is going to decrease. But the increase in the quantity in case of elastic demand is going to be greater than increase in the quantity in case of inelastic demand. So in case of inelastic demand, legalization of drugs will cause an increase with a smaller amount in drug usage compared to in case of elastic demand. But as it is a legal market, so the government can intervene in this market using government policy. So what are the government regulating policy? Number one, a high percentage or the greatest percentage of government expenditure on drug related problems should be directed toward demand side treatment. So we would like to decrease the demand. Number two, impose a system of excise tax on drugs in order to affect supply side or decrease supply. As it's considered as an additional cost of production, so as cost of production increases, supply is going to decrease. So this is the initial situation before imposing tax. Now the government is going to impose tax on the suppliers. So the supply curve will shift to the left. As a result, the equilibrium quantity is going to decrease and the price is going to increase. So from the point of view of people who are in favor of drug legalization, the government can allow for drugs to be sold in the market in order to monitor them, to take the advantages in terms of social, economic, and health points of view. And then the government should take action in order to prevent or decrease the negative impact of legal drugs in the market through affecting demand side by directing a large proportion of government expenditure towards the demand side treatment. And number two, through imposing taxes on the suppliers, so the supply is going to decrease. This is the end of our lecture today. Thank you.